My name is Amy Carrera, Shield Healthcare's Corporate Registered Dietitian. Welcome to our webinar, Special Education, Expert and Parent Tips on Advocating for Your Young Child. This webinar will be recorded in case you missed any part of it. You can go to shieldhealthcare.com/webinars within 5 business days of this live recording to see it. Notice you can access a copy of the slides in the handout section on your screen. The webinar will be in listen-only mode. If you have a question, please type it into the question box in the control panel on your screen. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. We're pleased to have Joanne Lara as our webinar presenter today. Joanne is the founder of Autism Movement Therapy, Executive Director of Autism Works Now, and she was the autism expert for the Fox show Touch. Joanne is credentialed as a moderate to severe education specialist to work with children and adolescents with multiple disabilities, including autism, cerebral palsy, developmental delay, and more. She will be presenting some tips on what to ask and how to advocate for your child to help him reach his highest potential. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Joanne.
Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope that the attendees will find the presentation informative, and let's get started. So the objective of the presentation is how to know whether your child needs special education, understanding special education, your rights, your legal rights, and your eligibility, knowing what services are available and which are best for your child, what to do if your child is not getting what he needs, and tips from parents who've navigated the special needs system. Signs that your child may need special education. Your child may require screening if you notice that he or she doesn't use gestures, doesn't point out objects to show interest in the world around him or her, doesn't use single words by 16 months or 2-word phrases by 24 months, loses verbal or social skills, withdraws, walks on his or her toes or doesn't walk at all and crawls one-sided with one arm. Where do you go for an assessment? There are 3 places that you can have an assessment done for your child. At the home school, meaning the school that your child would attend whether or not he or she attends at this time or not. That's considered your home school. Regional center, if you have one, not all states have regional centers. Regional centers are state and federal organizations that assist with special needs and disabilities. You can call your regional center if you have one in your area and ask them, tell them you'd like an intake and an assessment for your child, or a psychologist. Psychologists are able to test for eligibility of autism or any other disability that we need to assess for. The importance of early intervention. Early intervention really is the key. It's the key to success and helping your child become the best that he can be and make the most progress in the shortest amount of time. Help babies and toddlers with developmental delays or disabilities get into less restrictive environments. And we're going to talk about what that means. Less restrictive environment is a term called LRE that we use in the public school setting in special education. For example, full inclusion with related services and supports is an example of a least restrictive environment that would be written into your IEP. And we'll talk again about what an IEP is, an individualized education program that's given once your child meets the eligibility of special education. What is special education? Federal law protects the rights of people with disabilities and requires schools to provide special education, meaning a tailored academic education program, and related services, meaning occupational therapy, behavior, and speech and language services to individuals with disabilities. And what is that law called? The law that governs special education in this country is called IDEA. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It ensures that students with a disability are provided with a free and appropriate public education, which is known as FAPE, and it's tailored, that education is tailored to the individual needs of the student. ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. This act came about in this country in 1990. This prohibits discrimination in employment, public services, public accommodations, and telecommunications. 504 plan, that comes out of Section 504 ADA. It prohibits discrimination based upon your disability. It requires that the needs of the student, it's used in an education system, with disabilities are met as adequately as the needs of the non-disabled. And we'll talk further about if a 504 plan, and be sure to ask me if this is something that you would like to know about, what a 504 plan entails over an IEP, an individualized education program. Your rights, your federal and state regulation rights. There's 6 principles that fall under and mandate IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. They are: 1, zero reject. No one can be rejected from the process of meeting the eligibility of special education. Number 2, a non-discriminatory identification and evaluation, meaning you must have an evaluation, it must be provided to you, and the outcomes of that assessment and evaluation must be delivered to you in a team setting. Number 3, free and appropriate public education, what we call FAPE. It's free and it's appropriate, and that's the key word. What is appropriate for your child? And you discuss that with the IEP team, and everyone decides what the appropriate education is for your child. Number 4, least restrictive environment, or LRE, meaning where is your child going to be educated? In what placement setting? Are they going to be in a special day class with other individuals with special needs? Are they going to be in a general education setting with their peers and supported with services that push in or pull out? And we'll talk more about that. Or are they going to be in a residential, or are they going to be in a hospital setting? Those are the settings for LRE, or least restrictive environment. Number 5, due process safeguards, meaning if you do not agree with the IEP team, you have the right to go to due process. And number 6, parents and students' participation and shared decision making must be honored. Eligibility. For a child to be declared eligible for special education and related services, meaning OT, speech and language and behavior, physical therapy, it must be determined that the child is a child with a disability and is in need of special education and related services. How is the eligibility determined? An individualized education plan, or IEP, is needed. An IEP team of parents and qualified professionals must determine whether the child has a disability and meets the needs of special education and related services. So under IDEA, there are currently 13 categories under which a child can receive these services. They are autism, deafness, emotionally disturbed, hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, or OHI, specific learning disability, or SLD, speech language impairment, traumatic brain injury, or TBI, and visual impairment. How is the eligibility determined? A request is made for initial evaluation or assessment. That can come through you, that can come through a physician or a pediatrician. The home school has 60 days from the date of the request to assess your child, 60 days. The IEP team meets to determine if the child is eligible for special education services after this assessment has been done. The IEP team offers services to the parents, and the parent may accept or deny placement, eligibility, or even the eligibility of special education. The IEP team determines placement now, where the education will take place. Where will your child or this student be educated, and what is the placement or the environment? A special day class, or what we call an SDC or an SDP, special day program. Full inclusion, meaning educated with typical general education peers with supports. And those supports are what we call RSP, Resource Specialist Program, meaning if your child needs special accommodations or remedial in speech and language, then they will go out to or be pushed in. That resource person will come into the classroom and remediate language, English and reading and comprehension, or math. Math can be determined as a resource delivered, either pushed into the class, meaning the specialist comes into the class and remediates the student in the setting, or the student goes out, which we call pull out. Occupational therapy, that's OT, that's all about gross motor and cognitive, working together to help the student be the best that he can be. Speech and language, speech pathologist would assess for this service, and if your child meets the eligibility of speech and language, then the IEP team and the speech and language pathologist will determine how many minutes a week your students will receive speech and language. Applied behavioral analysis, ABA. This is working with targeted behaviors and the entire team, and a school-wide effort in order to help the behaviors to either be decreased if we need them decreased, or increased if we need an increase in a behavior. For instance, if we need to see our child be able to work on task for longer periods of time, then we would be looking at an increase in a behavior. If we're looking at a child who maybe is not able to sit in his seat and attend a task and is throwing himself out of a chair, then we would want to look at a decrease in that behavior. Adapted physical education, or is known as APE, is also a service that's offered for our students. How is eligibility determined? The IEP team determines that a child has a specific learning disability if the child is provided with learning experiences appropriate for his or her age, ability, and the child has a severe discrepancy between the achievement and the intellectual ability in one or more of these areas. Oral expression, listening comprehension, written expression, basic reading skills, reading comprehension, mathematic calculation, mathematic reasoning, and or teacher reports or presents a portfolio on daily work which shows academic performance is not in an acceptable range. The assessment guidelines for eligibility are: 1, observation. At least one team member, other than the child's regular teacher, should observe the child's academic performance in the regular classroom setting. In the case of a younger child in a school age, or an out-of-school individual, a team member shall observe the child in an environment that's appropriate for a child at that age. Assessment guidelines for eligibility continued. Then a written report will happen, whether the child has a specific learning disability, the basis for making the determination, meaning what were the assessment tools used, relevant behavior noted during the observation of the child, anecdotal notes as to what was seen during the observation, relationship of that behavior to the child's academic functioning. How does the behavior impede or get in the way of the academic functioning? Educationally relevant medical findings, if there are any, whether there is a severe discrepancy between achievement and ability that is not correctable without special education and related services. determination of the team concerning the effects of the environment, cultural, or the economic disadvantage. IEP meetings and emergency IEP. An annual IEP meeting with the team are held every school year. This would be once your child meets the eligibility of special education and is given an IEP. They have an annual meeting every year, and the goals and objectives of the student are addressed. The present levels of performance, we call them PLOPs, are discussed. Where is your child at this time currently in the academic areas of math, language arts, vocational skills? Everyone on the IEP team is held accountable for reporting the student's progress. The parents are there, special education teacher is there, one general education teacher is supposed to be there, and one administrator is supposed to be there, along with service providers. Anyone providing a service for your child should be at the IEP meeting. The 3-year IEP meeting is a formal assessment. So we'll do another assessment. Psych will come in and do another assessment. It's conducted by the special education teacher as well, the nurse and the psychologist. Everyone reports on the 3-year IEP. This is the comprehensive IEP, and everyone is present to determine the continued eligibility of special education and the progress that the student has made over the last 3 years. The placement is also reviewed. Is this the right place? Is this the least restrictive environment for this student at this time? Have we made considerable progress, and do we want to look at a mainstreaming or a full inclusion setting for this student? Now, you should all know that an emergency IEP meeting can be called at any time with a written notice, and they have 10 days to comply with your request. What is the appropriate education setting? You'll want to look at what are these least restrictive environments to help determine, along with the IEP team, what's best for your child. A full inclusion setting is the least restrictive. We talked about that. Students enrolled in a general education classroom with the typical age-appropriate peers. The related services, meaning the occupational therapist, the behaviorist, the speech and language pathologist, the adopted PE teacher, all these are related services, are delivered in one of two ways. They can push in, meaning those specialists in the related services area would come in and provide the service for whatever amount of minutes is determined by the IEP team in the classroom. That's a push-in setting. Pull out would mean that your child goes out of the classroom in order to get the remediated services, the speech and language, or the OT related services. So again, let's look at what those services are. Occupational therapy, OT, physical therapy, PT, speech, applied behavior analysis, ABA, adapted physical education, APE, assistive technology. Don't overlook assistive technology. You need to discuss that with your IEP team. If you feel that an iPad, and your child doesn't have one in the school setting, is going to help him, an iPad, a computer, assistive technology. If your child doesn't have speech and language, do we need a Big Mac? Do we need another form of communication for them? We want to make sure that our students are getting assistive technology. You need to know to ask for that. And counseling. Our students are due 12 counseling sessions without a protocol to ask for continued counseling. So 12 counseling sessions. If you feel that your child would benefit from counseling, make sure you bring that up in the IEP and ask for that. Mainstreaming. So we have full inclusion, now we're going to mainstreaming. Mainstreaming is when your student or your child is enrolled in a special day class program for the majority of the day and then goes out into the general education setting. That's determined, the number of minutes that your child will spend in a general education setting is determined by the IEP. Now, given our nutrition, lunch, and recess, and that comes in at about 15 to 20%. If you feel that you want your child to be in the general education setting for more more percentage of the day, that's of the day, than that, then you'll want to bring that up to the IEP team. In other words, if your child is good at math and you want your child to be in a general education math setting, then you'll want to bring that up at the IEP meeting and make sure that we can find an appropriate math class for your child to attend daily, as well as addressing whether or not your child might need support in that math class. Do they need an aide to come with them? Because if so, then that has to be written in and determined in the IEP as well. An IEP team determines what percentage of the time the student spends in the general education setting. Like I said, it's typically 25% initially. That is a federal mandate. Appropriate education setting, and then we have the special day class. So it's full inclusion. Least restrictive environment is full inclusion in the academic setting. Full inclusion, mainstreaming, and then special day class where your child is spending the majority of the day in a special ed class, except for nutrition, lunch, and recess. It is the most restrictive environment that there is. The student is enrolled in the setting for 100% of the day. Advocacy, mediation, and due process. You have the right to go to mediation if your issues are not resolved in your IEP meeting. You have the right to continue to due process if mediation doesn't work out for you and you're not satisfied with the results. You have the right to bring an attorney or any other person to an IEP meeting who you consider a team member. You have the right to record the IEP meeting if you let the school know in advance in writing. I will let you know that if you let them know you are recording, they will record as well. You have the right to adjourn an IEP meeting at any time and ask to reschedule it. So if you're in an IEP meeting and it's getting emotionally heated and you want to stop the meeting, you have the right to say, I would like to make a motion that we stop the IEP meeting and resume at a future date. Additional therapies that we can look at that are not what we call traditional therapies with brain disorders such as autism. I like to say you want to make sure that your child is looked at as different but not less. We want to look at neuroplasticity and cognitive disabilities, the ability for the brain to change. We know that we can stimulate areas of the brain that are interfering with audio processing, visual processing, and gross motor. And a lot of times we can do that through alternative therapies. Autism movement therapy is one of those. Dance movement therapy, music and art therapy are very beneficial for our kids. Hippotherapy, working with horses, horseback riding, yoga, music, theater, martial arts. Lots of kids that are doing martial arts. Look at alternative therapies for your child. Many times in the school setting there are art therapies that our kids are involved with. Make sure you ask and see if your child is enrolled or if your class is part of the arts and education program. Very beneficial for our kids. The resources that are available to you, there's just only a few, of course. The U.S. Department of Education, or IDEA, this is the website. Rights Law, what are your laws? That's the definitive on the laws for special education. The Center for Parent Information and Resources. Learning Disabilities Association of America. The ARC, that's a federal organization. It's across the country. They are full of lots of resources, attorney resources, resources for if you just have questions, call your ARC. Regional centers, again, we have them in California, and they are in a number of other states. So you'll want to see if your state has regional centers. It's a wonderful source of information, and you'll want to be a part of, or a consumer, as we call it, with a regional center if you have one in your state. And there's the website for Autism Movement Therapy. It's a movement and music program designed for individuals with autism and related disorders.
Thank you so much, Joanne. That was very informative. You really covered a lot of the important aspects of special education At this time, we have a couple of special guest speakers, a couple of parents who have been through this process and have been successful in advocating for their children, and they would like to share their experiences with you. I will start with Amy Collin, who you see on the screen here, and I will let her go ahead and introduce herself. Take it away, Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy, and I am the mother of Sam, and Sam was born 3 months early at 1 pound 11 ounces, and he was in the hospital for 5 months, and came home, and he had immediately, we never had to, at that point we didn't have to really advocate it for him just yet. Services came to the house, regional center was involved, and the hospital was involved in setting up services for him. And at around a year, he received his assessment and was found eligible for physical therapy and occupational therapy. And then, so they would come to the house 2 days a week, one for the OT, one for the PT. And at 2 years old, he then started, the regional center again was found eligible to attend early intervention school, which he went to Monday through Friday for about 4 hours. And that school was a good social environment for him, and he was around other kids. He also received PT, OT, he received speech. And so at 3 years old, then the district took over, and we were living up in Northern California at the time. And that was when his first IEP happened, and I was lucky enough to be able to take an IEP class. I would advise that to anybody, is to take an IEP class. Even before the whole process started, I didn't have any idea about how IEPs worked. So I took the class and really became knowledgeable in how the whole process worked. Sam received his services at that school. That was a special education preschool. We then moved down to Southern California, where we had a kind of a gold mine school district that offered very extensive services, and they greatly expanded to where he was receiving a significant amount of OT and PT, to the point where they also offered, they also paid for an off-site facility that he went to every week, and so that was really beneficial. My first opportunity to really advocate for Sam was when they were going to extend the hours, but they were going to have it be on site at the school rather than at this off-site facility. And so I then said, well, I kind of negotiated and said, you know, it's really going to be kind of an inconvenience in time and schedules here at the school to do it. I think it would just be better to have it at the off-site place where they already know him. So I kind of played up a little bit to how it would be advantageous for them. They wouldn't have to, you know, reschedule anybody or anything like that. We could just go after school, get it done, that's it. So, and that was the argument that won for me, that particular viewpoint, despite the fact that he'd had a relationship with this person at the offsite. That wasn't what worked. What worked was how it was beneficial for the school. So that was my first opportunity. After that, we moved to another district. This is where we got our home. And their services were completely different. They offered, he didn't receive the same services, or initially was not offered the same services that he was in this previous district. They were more into collaborative. He was still in preschool, and I felt that he needed all these services, so I did not sign off on the IEP, and the stayed in place, and the hours accumulated, and at first they weren't honoring these hours. So I got an advocate again through Regional Center. We were about to go to due process. They settled, and we didn't go to due process. But then I decided to meet individually with the assistant director and set up some kind of plan. and just do it on my own. And so finally we got to a point where he was owed, and they covered all his services, which, as I recall, was about 29 hours OT and 24 hours PT. And those were all pull-out, which he received. And that went all the way through kindergarten to first grade, because it took that long to get the services that he needed. After that, it was then the decision of whether to, how the mainstreaming and the special education was going to work, whether we should have them all in special education, what the percentages were. So he had an extended kindergarten day, because it was like a debate of full inclusion or not, and his neurologist said, you know, throw all the services you possibly can at him. He will let you know when it's enough. And so I said, well, I'm just gonna have him benefit from every service they have to offer. So I did that, and he went a longer day in kindergarten. He had special education services through first grade. Then in second grade, he just said to me, kind of towards the end of the year, he said, Mommy, this is getting too easy for me. Special education, he didn't say special education, but he said his teacher's name, that class is getting too easy for me. And I want to be in, the mainstream teacher at the time, I want to be in her class more. So I met with a special education teacher, and we made the decision for him to carry out the rest of the year the way things were. But in third grade, he said it again, and this was probably the second week of school, so I decided, we're going to do this, and we're going to make this happen for him. His mainstream teacher at the time told me he wouldn't be ready for it. He wouldn't be able to handle the speed of it. And I said, he's telling me I need to give my kid a chance here. So I studied the federal disability law, knew that all the rights were in his corner. In the past, I'd studied rights law, and which is a godsend. And so I had all these laws to get us through this process. So I met with the district. There were these two ladies. They were teachers on special assignment. I called them my guardian angels, because they were all for having Sam in that classroom. Whatever services he needed, they were going to do assessments to find out any of assistive technologies. The IEP team then got excited. They were willing to do what they could. The mainstream teacher was on board as well, as long as, I said, whatever you need, we'll all work together, And so what I did also was I volunteered in that classroom every Wednesday to help him through his math. They worked through assistive technology. As it turns out, he didn't really need a lot of them, but they were perfectly willing to put them in there and try it. So he went and he was in the math class. His math went up to a B, and it was a wonderful decision. As of last year, special education, the education teacher signed off, and now he is receiving, he's in this classroom and mainstream classroom, and receives a resource, and also has an aide with him to just get him through one task to the next in his mainstream classroom. He's in fifth grade now, and they use computers a lot in his class, which is great, which helps him a lot. So, and that's it. Probably the only thing I could say, just in terms of advice, is take the IEP class. Definitely know your rights. And most importantly, when you get the kid's diagnosis, that was another thing, one more thing. I did get a diagnosis of ataxic cerebral palsy, because general disability doesn't carry for too much until you get like an official diagnosis, which the neurologist gave me, so then I was eligible also for California Children's Services. This is in California. And then also the regional center was on board. I would say you're not alone in this. And it's scary when they get their diagnosis. It's scary when you don't know what's happening. But the sooner you can get services for them, learn the laws, the better off things are going to be, and it'll be okay. That's what I can say about that.
Okay, great. That's great, Amy. Thank you for wrapping that up with some of the tips that you have, which I think are really helpful. And again, that rights law resource is on the resource page, so you can go back in the handouts and look at that website. Thank you for sharing that. Now we will go to our next mom, Alicia Mishar, and Joanna will ask you to advance that slide so we can see Alicia and her son, Ben. Are you with us, Alicia?
I am with you.
Okay,
good
great.
morning. I'm happy to be here, and I actually have 2 children who receive special education services. Both my sons have Down syndrome, and as such, they both received qualification within weeks of being born for special education. We didn't have to go through the arduous process of determining if they needed special education because they were born needing special education. So I cannot speak to that, but what I can speak to is some of the things that continue to come up. Even, you know, we live in a good district, we have great services, but even so, I've had to advocate for my children in several ways. The first way that I'll bring up is our son Benjamin. He does have Down syndrome, Hirschsprung's disease, hearing impairment, cyclic vomiting syndrome, on the autism spectrum. He's a leukemia survivor, and there's a handful of other little things that go in there too. He is a very complex child, and his speech therapist advised me that working in the local district, most of her continuing education had been in working with more typical grade school students. So she did not feel equipped to work with Benjamin, who uses a mix of pictures, signs, and some spoken language. So we ended up in a position where we needed to keep him in the least restrictive environment, which is our local district, but we also needed to make sure that his speech therapy was appropriate. So in doing that, I did use free and appropriate public education, and I also used least restrictive environment. When I'm advocating for these things, like to get the speech therapist that he needs, because it costs the districts extra money, so they're going to scrutinize your request. One of the first things I do is, in my county, there is a local ARC office, and they have a free advocate. So that's something you can check in your local area to see if you have an ARC office that has a free advocate. And our advocate has been very helpful to me. She's willing to come to IEP meetings or other meetings, and she's also willing to help me sort out, is what I'm asking for appropriate? Am I going too far? You know, how do I ask for it? And what does the law say about this? So we were able to get Benjamin a more appropriate speech therapy and keep him in the least restrictive environment. So that was very helpful. Another situation that came up with my son Alex. Alex is a lot less complicated. He was born with Down syndrome, but he really is healthy and kind of in the mild to moderate impairment range. But in his district, the elementary school goes kindergarten through 4th grade. And then there's a 5th and 6th grade school building, and then the middle school, which contains 7th and 8th grade. At the time that he finished 4th grade, there was no services for special education in the 5th and 6th grade building where he attended. They moved all the special education students up to the 7th and 8th grade building. Well, that is a very restrictive environment because there isn't a single grade level class that he could attend in that environment, because he going in as a 5th grader into a 7th and 8th grade school, there was nothing that was appropriate for him. So the teachers kind of acted like this was just how things were done and it was no big deal. And I went through the meeting and I just I was stunned. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And at that time, I didn't know what to do. But what I did was I didn't commit to anything. I just said, okay, let me go home. We'll make our plan later. And, you know, stopped the meeting, went home, didn't commit to anything, didn't sign anything, and started contacting my advocates. So that opened the door, because all of the students in this district were skipping that 5th and 6th grade building and going right into the 7th grade building. By me stopping and thinking and advocating for my son, what ended up happening is all of the students in the district got a classroom that they needed in that 5th and 6th grade building, where they were in the least restrictive environment. They were getting an appropriate, free and appropriate public education. And all it took was me being aware of what my children's rights were. So that was a huge success for me. I succeeded not only for my son, but I succeeded for all of his peers. When that happened, thankfully, I have attended conferences since my children were little. The local education and Down syndrome associations have conferences, and I tap into those resources. I've attended rights law conferences, I've attended IEP conferences, you name it. If there's something that I can take to hone my abilities to advocate for my children, I do. And like the rights law conferences, they gave me 2 books that I can refer to as I need. And then, like I said, I tap into that local ARC office regularly. You know, we're approaching another issue with Benjamin again, and he's got a 2-hour bus ride each way from school, and I'm on the horn with my ARC office and making sure that we're taking care of this situation. A couple other tips that I've also learned along the way is I am a professional attending these meetings for my children. I see myself as the leader of the IEP meeting. I contact the teachers ahead of time, the teachers, the administrative staff, the therapy staff. I get a hold of them ahead of time, and we communicate about what the goals should be so that they're not doing their goals on their own, that we have input going forward. But I also show up dressed as a professional, and it's not essential, but for me that says I'm here and I mean business. And the other thing that I've learned is when tensions mount, because they will, sooner or later tensions will mount, you can pause, you can excuse yourself to get a drink of water, you can even close the meeting like I did when the teachers were telling me that my son was going to go to the middle school as a 5th grader. There are options. You never have to sign anything at the table. You can, there's a grace period. If you do agree to the IEP, you can change your mind. You can go back and you can ask for reevaluations. You can ask for changes. There are so many things that you can do, but you just have to know that those are your responsibility, that it's your right to be able to do it, and take the lead in doing it. So for me, in my experience, you know, I've just really learned as I've gone, but I do find that I never commit to anything I don't want. I never go in looking for a fight, ever. Even when I'm afraid, if I'm concerned, whatever the situation will be, I go in looking for a solution, not looking for a fight. I don't want to fight with the professionals that are working for my children. I want to solve problems with them. So those are some of the tips that I've learned over the years. You know, I've heard parents say, go in for my first IEP meeting and, you know, should I be prepared for a fight? And no, but you should be prepared to advocate and solve problems. So those are my experiences. By and large, we've been successful in getting for our children the things that we believe that they need. And every success gives you confidence for the next step going forward. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I love the way both of you are so positive, and your final message of looking for a solution and not a fight, I think will ring true for a lot of parents out there. We really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah. At this time, I would like to turn it back over to Joanne for any questions that we have. I do see we have a couple of questions on the board here, and one of them is, well, let's get a housekeeping question out of the way. Will the program be accessible after the presentation today? Absolutely. This webinar has been recorded, and within the next couple of days, we'll have it up on our website at shieldhealthcare.com/webinars. And our next question comes from Claudia. If a child has been diagnosed with ADHD, depression, and anxiety, and is currently taking medication, would you recommend, Joanne, that the parent ask the school to put the child in 504?
Yeah, absolutely. A 504 or an IEP, it falls under the eligibility of OHI, other health impaired ADHD. So there's two categories or two ways you can go. You can ask for an assessment and go an IEP route, or you still need an assessment for a 504 plan. So a 504 plan, I addressed it briefly, but a 504 plan is usually for any kind of an eligibility of a disability that we think we're probably going to be able to remediate in a short period of time. A behavioral, someone with a traumatic brain injury where we know that when the swelling goes down that the cognitive processes are going to be able to jump back in place. And it functions the same as an IEP in that the services that are required must be given. So yes, it's a better way to go because you can lose the eligibility easier. It's harder to lose an eligibility of an IEP in special education than it is a 504 plan. And remember, once our students transition and graduate and are in the community setting and are now going and transitioning into jobs, disclosure is part of the employment process. So if you have an IEP, you are to disclose that. So a 504 plan is much easier, as I say, to move away from it once the remediation has actually helped the student be able to move forward.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Another question that I see, once the IEP is developed and in place, how is that changed, or can that be changed?
Absolutely ongoing. It is an ongoing process. Meaning if you want services that you don't have, or the services you have you feel you don't need any longer, all of these are part of the process of the IEP team, and everyone on the IEP team will come to a consensus as to whether or not that should happen. If we want more services, or if we want less services, or how we want our student or our child educated in a least restrictive environment. Again, if you don't like what the team IEP consensus is, then you have the right to go to mediation. Mediation usually takes place at your school district, and it will be a big room full of a lot of people. So you might want to bring some of your own advocates and your own team, if you will, because you're going to now have to make a stand as to why you don't agree and what you want. And then the mediation team will decide whether or not they're going to acknowledge that and give it to you and consent to it, or not. And if an or not happens, then you'll want to move into due process. And there you might need, again, an advocate to help you navigate the laws.
Okay, thank you for that. what is available for children who are now adults and attending college or have aged out of the special education system?
Good question. The federal government is still mandates that each university system has a disability center. So, in that they don't have an IEP per se, those individuals that are in a secondary school system, be it a junior college or a four-year college, must be accommodated. Now, you want to begin to address that in your ITP process. ITP starts at 14 in many states or 16. That's a federal mandate. The ITP, Individualized Transition Plan, is part of the IEP process. It says, and the team decides and comes to a consensus that they agree on how that individual will be socially supported, how that individual will live residentially in a group home or in the family setting, or how they will live in the community, and what the employment will look like. So those are the three areas and categories that we're addressing in the ITP process. The ITP process is a little known strategy that's embedded into the IEP. You need to familiarize yourself if your students or your child is beginning to age out of the public school system at 18 or 22 with the ITP process, and make sure that you get what is due you as per the federal government. I just wrote a 10-page article on this. It's in Autism Asperger's Digest. It's all about the transition plan. So you might want to look at that, or if you email me, I will be happy to email you that article. It took me 6 months. I went out, I reached out to different universities, different settings for transition, where they support our students as they go to a college setting. But back to your question and answer of it. Each college, university, or junior college has a disability center. You want to register, make sure your student registers with the disability center. You can have notes taken, you can record, you can have proximity seating, you can have longer extended time on your testing. There are many accommodations that are due your student. So make sure you take advantage of that.
Thanks, Joanne. So it sounds like that's a process that you need to start having in mind as soon as you start an IEP or the special education process. You need to be thinking about the college track. Is that the case?
No, not as soon as you start. I mean, we're looking at parents that are probably going to start either at a pre-K or a kinder setting. Many of our attendees, I think, you always want to have in your mind, 10 years down the road, what does it look like for my child? You want to have that vision for your student, and you want to make sure that you help that IEP team to have that vision too. And I mean, something is, say your child loves trains, and many of our kids love Thomas the Train. You're not going to take that Thomas the Train and equate it to a job at an 18 or 22 years of age. But that means at that time you want to say to the IEP team, you know what, he loves trains. I'm thinking he might work at a train station. He might do something in train scheduling. You want to find something you can hang your hat on that looks like employment for that child. As you move forward, they're all going to say, oh yeah, well, he's so young now, it's, but nonetheless, you're going to keep bringing that up. What does he want to do with his life? What do I see him doing with his life? A vision for you means a vision for him. If we don't give our students the vision for themselves, who will? So we have to begin to believe in them and see a vision for them. Many of us, look at us. I wanted to be a veterinarian. It didn't happen. I'm a special educator. So things change. Things change all the way along our lives, but we have to begin to address it in a federal mandate at 14 in most states, or by 16 in the rest of the states. So that means you are really looking at a formalized, what we call an ITP plan, Individualized Transition Plan. Our kids are able to stay in the school setting. They can either graduate at 18, or if they have a moderate to severe eligibility, they can stay from 18 to 22. This is now my agenda, my path. I started Autism Works Now. It's a pre-employment to Jobs training program that is a pilot program in its second year. We've gotten an Autism Speaks grant. Temple Grandin is part of our program. We're writing a book for Jessica Kingsley Publisher for secondary education and what the template should look like for pre-employment. So we do want to always have in the back of our mind, we want to bring it more forward in a middle school setting and a high school setting for sure.
Okay, thank you. That's great. That does lead me to our next question was, can my 18-year-old child stay at the regular high school until she is 21? If her school wants her to move to transition because she will be 19 years old, she's not sure that's the best place for her. Where can this parent find mediation or the advocacy in her area? She is in Chicago, but I'm sure that would be able to be available in different areas.
Okay, so first I need to understand the question. If your child wants to stay in, you want her to stay in until he's 20, it's 21, but as soon as they turn 22, then they're exited out of the public school setting. That's federal mandate. The option is an 18 to 22 school transition program. Do you not want her to attend that? And if so, you don't have to. You don't have to do that. You don't need mediation for that. You exit your child at 18. You have the option and the right to do that. You do not have to keep your child in.
So I guess the main question would be finding advocacy in your area. And if we go back to that resources slide, that shows the ARC, Rights Law, Learning Disabilities Association of America, different resources that are available to find in your area. So those would be good places to look in terms of advocacy. So those are all great questions. It looks like those are all of the questions that we have this morning. And Joanne, I thank you for educating us about your program on employment as well, because that obviously is the next step for these kids.
Absolutely. And that's a new movement in this country. We haven't been thinking about what our individuals and students with special education, what their lives are going to look like after 22 in the public school system. But we have a big movement now in this area, thankfully, due to Temple Grandin and individuals like myself that are educating parents on the ITP process. I can't stress to you how important it is to know what the ITP mandates and what your rights are and what you want to begin to look for in an ITP. You should have, when you're beginning to have IEPs that have an ITP, the social service, SSI should be there. Department of Rehabilitation should be there. Someone from outside services that is going to help your child get a job needs to be at that IEP meeting. And the more you know, the more powerful you can make that plan. If you don't know anything about that plan, your child exits at 22, and I hate to say it, but the back of your home for the next 60 years. So you really want to get on board on what is that job employment piece going to look like for your child. And I'm happy if you email me. It's jolara@roadrunner.com. I'm happy to answer any questions or send you that article that I spoke about on transitioning that was just published in Autism Asperger's Digest. I'm a columnist for them.
Thank you. We will certainly get that article and put it on our website for everyone to see as well. We'll put a link to that. At this time, I think we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar, and then any questions that haven't been answered will be answered by email. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending the webinar. Again, this webinar will be recorded and available on our website, schildhealthcare.com/webinars in just a couple of days. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.